That's what it sounds like.
Hey, that was pretty good, man.
Yeah, good jam session, Baines.
You are hep cat.
So hot, real cool. So cool.
Hello, this is the Quackcast, the Drunk Duck Quackcast. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Pitface. Hi, Pitty. Pitty?
Hello, Ozzy.
Hey, Tansy. Hi, Tans.
Hello, Ozzy. Oz.
That was very calculated. And hello, Bainesy.
Hello.
All right, so this is Quackcast number 382, and I want to talk about a bunch of things like suspension of disbelief, which is an interesting thing. I haven't outlined it to these guys properly, but, you know, everyone understands the concept of suspension of disbelief. And if we have time, we'll talk about the idea of pleasing yourself or pleasing the crowd, which is an interesting thing. Pleasing. What would you do to please the crowd? And
Depends on how much they pay me.
That's right.
And when feedback doesn't come, which is Tance's latest post, we'll see what we get into anyway. There are a whole bunch of interesting little paths we can take. But before we do that, we've got to get into the feature. And this week, Kauai has given us a feature called Electricity is Her Element. So, Kauai, give us that.
Okay.
Hello, this is Quackcast Oxy, and the feature I've selected for this week is Electricity is Her Element by Callaway, and it is rated E for everyone. Enter into the stunning realm of galactic dragons that live on Jupiter and its moons. There are characters that embody different elements, 4 spirits that are the Storm Lords, and they help bring balance to the chaos that is unfolding. The characters fluidly and seamlessly blend with the cosmic backgrounds. This comic is drawn in full vibrant color using traditional media such as Prisma markers. The art is bold and all the text is hand-lettered while using different, unique fonts for each different character. Slip into a fantastical journey of dragons and read Electricity is Her Element by Callaway, rated E.
And that was Kauai with Electricity is Her Element. Love that artwork. All right, now we have the featured music this week. Gun Wallace has given us the theme to Riddick Q Loss, I think it's called. This is a clever title by Mozzymad. Riddick Q Loss Tales. Okay, so Riddick Q Lost Tales. This features fast-paced, cool, speedy jazz for the active person, wild and frenetic, buzzing trumpets with an awesome rhythm section. It's all happening here, the club is jumping, and the music is pumping. So take it away, Gun Wallace, with Riddick Q Lost Tales by Mozzymad. And that was the music, Riddick Q Loss by Mozzymad, and the music was by Gun Wallace. Thank you for that. Great little jazz number. All right, so let's talk about the suspension of disbelief. So what is suspension of disbelief? Do you guys know what it is? I'm pretty sure you're adults. You're people
Yes.
of the world. You've been around somewhat.
I'll be 18 next year, but I still know what it is.
you are of age.
I know what it is. You know what it is, Oz?
Okay, so
What it is.
suspension of disbelief is we create a world where we make our audience believe that this world is real. So all these characters and stuff like that, we can feel for them, and we can get into the story because it has a certain reality for us. We suspend our disbelief while we are watching this, and this applies to everything. This doesn't apply to just fantasy or science fiction. This applies to all works of fiction. You suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
You can imagine that this jazz musician really is a detective named Johnny Staccato. You can believe in the reality of this world for the time that this is on the screen. That suspension of disbelief. And it's an
You
important
ignore the
thing.
fact that this is on a TV and there are cameras shooting it, and there's like a crew just out of frame. Or in a play, like it's just a black set with 2 chairs on it. Like you sort of
Exactly.
ignore that and sort of immerse yourself. I've heard it called immersion also.
Yeah.
You just sort of, you just accept
Precisely.
as reality for a little while what you're looking at.
You believe that Punch and Judy really are 2 real people, and they have a legitimate argument with each other, and you care that that Punch is going to kill the baby by accident, and poor old Judy.
Sounds like a disturbing story. I don't know this.
Classic cinema from the 1300s.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, it's a suspension of disbelief is a core thing to all fiction. I don't know if I'm overreaching by saying it, but I'm going to do it
I
anyway.
would say so. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. And I would say that between speaking about immersion and suspending your disbelief, the entire function implied is that the audience isn't the reader or the one who is watching the movie or whatever, is in a position to just forget themselves and not go, hang on, this doesn't make sense. The whole point
Exactly.
is for you to manage to keep your audience from thinking that.
Exactly. It's like you've got a soccer ball and you're kicking it on your feet, and you've just got to keep on bouncing that in the air or spinning that basketball on your finger, whatever. And your job is just to keep that in the air and not let it drop. And if you let it drop, then you lose your audience. You start to lose them. So, you can play with that. You can deliberately break the 4th wall, which is, the 4th wall. That's the 3 walls surrounding your character, of their world, surrounding them. The 4th wall is the one between you and them, and when they break that, they speak to you directly. That can, rupture the suspension of disbelief, but you're using it in that way. That's a technique that's fun to use. So yeah, there are ways of doing that in everything, in comics, in movies, plays, whatever. You can totally do that as well, but that is, you don't want to do it by accident.
Even when you're breaking the 4th wall, like for example in the Deadpool movie, you still don't disrupt the suspension of disbelief, and that's the whole issue. You can pretty much do anything as long as the audience isn't thrown out of the spell, of the charm, of whatever it is that you are telling them, and they don't back the force that is you pushing them towards a certain direction as they are following the story. So, like for example, people expect to be talked to by Deadpool. If he doesn't do that, then their suspension of disbelief might actually be disturbed.
Yeah,
Disrupted.
it doesn't go against the tone of the movie. It goes, you know, it doesn't go against the tone of the movie, and that's to say, like, you know, that's why a more serious character, like, I don't know, like if Captain America did that or something, all of a sudden it'd be more startling. Because that's not the tone that we're immersed in.
That would break the suspension of disbelief, definitely, if Captain America did that. That's a good point. Yeah. So, as you say, it's about the tone. It's about the style and the tone and maintaining that. And other things along those lines, like logic rules. So your world has a set of logic rules that work, that, you know, are understandable by the audience. And so things can, you know, cause and effect. Stuff makes sense. This character thinks this way, and they're going to be terribly offended if the other character does this or whatever, because that's how things work in this world, and that makes sense to the audience. You know, you've set up a bunch of rules for your world, and you follow them, and that helps suspension of disbelief, because when, as an audience, when a world sort of makes sense, it's so much easier to immerse yourself in it when everything sort of fits together well. And if you break that, if you start to break that, then the world crumbles so quickly. When you think, hang on, why is this character suddenly flying? Why is there magic in this world? You know, that kind of thing. Where did this thing come out of? I don't know. I've lost my suspension of disbelief. Now I'm no longer rooting for the film anymore. I'm no longer sort of invested in it so much. And that's what that really happens. That when the audience isn't invested anymore, then they don't care about it. Then at the end, you don't go, oh, my suspension of disbelief was messed up, because you don't think in those terms. You just say, yeah, I just didn't get, or I didn't care about the characters, and that's because of what happens. You don't literally think, oh, suspension of disbelief is shaky now. It's getting towards the red zone. Oh, there we are. It's over.
When things don't make sense, that's a bad sign, and that might actually happen, not necessarily just if a character starts suddenly flying or whatever. It could happen by having a character react in a way that you wouldn't expect them to normally react the way they have been introduced and fleshed out. Like if you have a character that is customarily very like that he growls and he hates people and he generally doesn't like being around people, and he chases kids off his lawn and things like that. And then suddenly he dons a Havana set and goes in a luau to be the heart of the party. Then that's going to throw off the audience if you don't justify it well enough. Like they are gonna give you a chance. The audience is gonna give, okay, why is this happening? But if you don't immediately give them a hook to grab on, they're gonna fall out of the story, basically. Which is suspension.
Yeah, you know, it could be like this character is like, you know, he's trying to defend himself. He's saying, you know, I didn't beat her. I did not. And then someone walks into the room. He goes, you know, oh hi Mark, and suddenly he's happy. You know that.
Yeah, and the immediate reaction is, who talks like that?
Maybe Mark just makes everyone so happy when he's seeing it. Maybe that's it.
Oh, hi, Mark.
So yeah, it could be as simple as that. Yeah. So I was just talking to who was it? Noelle Dreves, Noelle Criminova, whatever she calls herself now. So she's this great person who does, you know, a lot of comics and stuff, and she was talking about how she's doing a comic set in America. So she's an Australian. She's doing a comic set in America, and she has a co-author who is American, and the co-author sort of corrects all the stuff like gas station instead of petrol station, as Australians would say, and stuff like, all these Australianisms she corrects to being American, and things as simple as that will bounce you out of suspension of disbelief, because you were, is this person even American? Does this person even know what America's like? If they're using the wrong terms for stuff, that can sort of bounce you out as well. If things don't make sense to the time and place where it's meant to be set. Like I was reading this story about this character who's like in Britain in the 19th century or whatever, and the author is describing this huge country house, but he's using American terms for it, and it bounces you out of suspension of disbelief because it just is jarring. It does not make sense to use that kind of thing. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to be aware of when you're writing.
Speaking of, as you mentioned, the writing. A thing that we were taught was when using imagery, when describing, in beautiful narrative, describe by everything about the story, that your vocabulary, even if you are not writing in a first person limited or whatever, like you don't put your words into the mouth of a character, even if you are the omniscient narrator that is outside the sphere of the story, you should limit your vocabulary and your description to the time and place and era that you are having your story unfold in. Because, like, for example, if you are talking about ancient anything and you describe something, he growled like an engine when there was no engine. Like, they are not talking about engines. They don't know about engines. It's just the author saying that he growled like an engine or like a motor boat or something like that. Yeah. And it completely throws you out of the era of the everything.
Yeah, anachronisms are a problem.
Hard to say. Yeah, definitely. Like, and not only just that, like, that it doesn't just pertain to, like, stay in, the decent era and stuff like that, which is a big thing. But also, like, I like the term that you use, don't put your words in the character's mouth. And I think that also goes as far as to say is, like, don't just use your character as a mouthpiece for your beliefs or ideologies or the way that you specifically see the world without any interpretation for how that character may see things in their predicament. Because, like, I'm trying to think of some examples, but I know that there's been plenty of times where I've seen characters and all of a sudden they'll launch some spiel and it's so obvious. It's like, oh, like the author was sitting there and, like, this got them mad one day, and so they're just gonna go and put it in their comic. Like, don't do that shit either. Just
absolutely. That's very annoying because it's like you feel the character suddenly is getting possessed, like that Mr. Smith in the Matrix, and now they are talking about if your life has a future.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, and that one. And
that's terrible. If you want to put your words into a character's mouth, that's totally legit. But you have to build the character to logically and justifiably be able to be your mouthpiece. And I'm thinking about myself a lot in the sense that I love soap boxes. If you allow me within the vicinity of the soapbox, I will stand on it and not get off.
Well, you're a short person, so.
Yeah.
It's just to see the parade. Yeah, you gotta get somehow.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So, however, my views cannot easily be represented by any of my characters in my comic in Without Moonlight right now, because it wasn't the time. and it wasn't the era. And it's extremely hard to get a person to say what I really believe in that particular context and in that particular era. And basically, I don't have any character that I would agree with in an argument in the story. We would be at each other's throat, I'm pretty sure. And I am waiting for the moment where I can have my character speak what I think. But that's not going to be in this arc even. I mean, they have to just get away from that particular era and time to pass by a little bit and get certain experiences that would give them the chance to put together and think about certain things that they can't think of right now. So if I were to, for example, hijack Basil, who I could, he likes to preach. He would really feel unnatural in saying things that I believe.
Yeah. So it's important. Going back to suspension of disbelief, that's part of it. Yeah, it will bump you out of the world when characters do that. So you have to be sensitive to the form your story takes and the needs of your story, rather than yourself as an author. If it's really important your character's going to say this, do it in a way that meets the needs of the story and will not negatively affect the audience. Because, we do care about making our things understandable and entertaining enough that people will stick with it and not just quit. So
and I have to say about that as well. See sold books. The one thing I want to say is that if you really, really, really want people to think something, make the context and the situation be such that the characters may not talk about it, but your audience will think it. And if you manage to get that to happen, that is, first of all, extremely delicious for the creator. I have experienced it and it's amazing. And also, it doesn't get people thrown out of the story for introducing a more modern, let's say, concept or a different concept than what you would expect in your setting. And yet still you do make your point. You get your point across.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you're manipulating your audience, brainwashing them.
Exactly.
I do like having characters like argue for the opposite of what I think. That is I really like doing that and denying what this is a slightly different thing, but sort of like aggressively denying like what's obviously true. And then you have commenters seeing the truth. That's great. Yeah.
Oh God, you Svengali's evil people. All right, so that's the whole suspension of disbelief, and maintaining it can be a lot harder than you think to maintain it. It's quite a tricky thing. Well, you just got to be sensible in a lot of ways. You just got to do your research and think about yourself as a reader. I think you've always got to remember those things. Don't introduce things that don't make sense within the context of your story. Yeah. Like my stupid helicopters that I regret every second of every day that I had in PKTA.
I'm thinking, for example, in a movie like 300, where you have the original 300 movie was extremely entertaining, and it requires a bit more active suspension of disbelief because you've got fighters that are going to be hacking at each other with swords and arrows and spears going in just like their beachwear to battle. But once you decide that, okay, this is how they do battle, okay, I'm gonna just not focus on that. The rest comes very, very pleasantly to you.
All right.
However, in the second 300, sorry, I'll finish with that one. In the second 300, they talk a lot about freedom, like, and we're gonna do defend our freedom, and we are going to uh, um, be extremely heroic defenders of the free world and things like that, which is a worse offense. They are more properly dressed, let's say, but they still, talk about freedom and probably, discovering nuclear weapons somewhere or something. And it's complete. It makes you laugh at them because the ancient folk didn't talk like this and didn't talk about freedom like this. And it's so modern. It's so absolutely modern, the turns of phrase, that it's like someone is doing a voiceover of these ancient guys. Like in those bad lip reading videos, YouTube videos.
Oh, those are fun. Okay, that brings up an interesting point. You mentioned in the first 300, so you've got the characters, the ridiculous costumes they wear, which and you said once you accept that, then the rest comes easy. So maybe sometimes when you're introducing a crazy anachronistic kind of thing in the middle of in the beginning of something, then and audience accept that, you manage to make them accept that, then it's a bit easier to sort of be a bit looser in the rest of your thing. As long as you get them to accept some big thing, then it's already, you look at it and think, oh, right, okay, so that's the kind of movie it is. All right, so I'm hyped up for this weird kind of hyper masculine kind of cartoonish kind of thing, and that's what this is going to be. It's not going to be a historical, logical kind of sensible thing. This is what it is. And then when everything else happens later on, when crazy fights and weird characters, you think, yeah, who cares? It's all this. It's part of the same world that gave me guys in their undies and silly helmets fighting.
Yeah.
So yeah. That can be a good technique. Go on.
But then if you try to switch it and have people have like sort of an emotional like heaviness based on the historical events, or just for example, that's when you'd run into trouble. Like you try to sort of have it both ways, maybe, or
if you reel it back,
like to feel bad for the real people in the historical event who died or something like that. You have to sort of know what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, if you tried to make it, if you try to introduce something that's too historical into that context, then it would start to crumble. You've got to sort of maintain the same level of, if you said, yes, and they lost this battle and that was trouble for Greece ever after, blah, blah, maybe, I don't know. But
yeah, maybe it would, yeah.
You could start to lose it. But what are you going to say, Pitt?
I was going to say, it's just kind of more of like another point I realize that makes me kind of snap out of a movie like that. It makes me question my what the hell do we call it? I can't even think right now.
Suspension of disbelief.
I always get it confused with saying suspension of belief. Suspension of disbelief. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. But another thing that does it to me really quick are movies that tend to be heavy-handed allegories. Like, for instance, the movie I'm about to use as a for instance, admittedly I've never seen before, but I haven't seen it specifically because of what I've heard about it, is Avatar, the one with the blue people.
Oh, yeah,
and how it just turns into just this thing about the environment and stuff, which I'm all for, creating awareness about the environment and stuff. But when I feel like I'm watching this movie that all of a sudden turns into like a PSA, this heavy-handed allegory, you better not fuck with the environment, bad things are going to happen, and especially when it's something just so overdone, like that'll take me out of it super quick. And and I think part of the suspension of disbelief in that lies in not only that it's annoying and treats you like an idiot, but also in that well-written stories aren't so cut and paste like that. You know?
Yeah.
A good fluid story doesn't have that final, I'm not going to say final big message, because a lot of good movies also do have a conclusion at the end, maybe of some kind, but just the heavy-handedness of that, just fucking, I can't take it, man, when movies do that. It pisses me off so badly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I thought I was the only one who've never seen that movie.
I haven't seen it either.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Chance, have you?
I have, actually, yes.
Combo breaker.
No, I have seen it, and it's Blue Cat Pocahontas, basically.
Right, that's what I heard about it too.
Yeah,
it's Pocahontas, guys. It's Pocahontas and Ferngully, the same. If you have seen Ferngully, the cartoon, that's it, with Pocahontas thrown in as the princess. So
I haven't seen
that's basically.
So I don't have to see this.
I have to say, it didn't feel so much as an allegory for the environment as a whole, whites versus indigenous American tribes.
Yeah.
It felt more
allegory, nonetheless, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was like, what if all the Indians were blue and all the whites were just the human race, basically. So.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
and I have to say that at the time I saw it, I was slightly unhappy with it. In the sense, like, I walked out of the cinema feeling unhappy. And when I get this feeling, it's like something doesn't tie very well in the allegory doesn't lock in well. There are things that I have issues with, and that is another thing that can throw you out in the suspension of disbelief, even assuming that you don't mind. I personally don't mind allegories. I'm all for them if they are careful in the analogies. Like, be careful.
Not just black and white, like this is bad and this is good, and like transfer this onto this, like
And it added the insult to injury of having this white dude become the savior of all the blue dudes.
White savior.
And then he also left his body. Spoiler, sorry. Yeah, he left his body and he permanently inhabited this new blue cat person body. But he was basically a white dude. Doing what that horror movie Get Out was all about, with the white people possessing the bodies of black people, something like that. I don't remember. I haven't seen that movie. Anyway, but it's something that is very perversely offensive in a sense. So you have this. I would understand if this dude that was white came and brought his amazing superior gunpowder over to the other side so that they could, deal with the invaders that are technologically more advanced and everything. I could understand that, but he doesn't do that. What he does is that he, being a complete newbie to their culture and their thing and their planet and their everything, becomes the best in their culture and their planet and their animals and everything. Like, he masters everything. He becomes this legendary figure, and he leads them all into victory.
Oh,
and I don't like that. I don't.
Yeah, that kind of writing is so fucking lazy. I can't do it, dude. I'm done with it. I can't do it. As soon as I smell that something that is in the air, it's so easy to turn me off. Of like the rest of your story better be pretty good and engaging, because that's like one of those things it'll just take me right out.
Yeah.
It takes the audience out of the suspension of disbelief because your message is so totally strong. It's stronger than anything else, and it's irritating. Whereas,
not even necessarily that it's strong, but that it's just fucking lazy. It's
lazy.
Strong and it's lazy. Yeah.
Well, say, and a clever allegory is something like in Edward Scissorhands, where that's obviously a sort of a fairy tale about someone who doesn't fit in to the environment, to the people around him, and people being very conservative, and their reactions to him. There's a lot you can take away with that, and you absorb it more naturally. You don't look at it and think, oh, they're trying to force me to think this way because that's how they presented this idea, and I am just annoyed because I don't want to be forced into thinking in that way. It's not like that, whereas this Avatar you're talking about does, and that's offensive. We don't want to be obviously manipulated.
It's not even the manipulation, because there are other films that do that, but you say, okay, I'm buying that because you did it so well and well done.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that now I'm thinking about all these years later. Again, I'm thinking about it. It's not even only Pocahontas and Ferngully. It's fucking bleep, gorillas in the mist, where it's gorillas in the mist, and you have this allegory of these gorillas being indigenous American peoples, and that's so. Now I realize why I was so disturbed when I was walking out of the theater, because they deal with it like they go in, they consider these people animals, they become glorified animals, the whole trope of the noble savage sort of thing, and then they possess the leadership because they are so much better off in skills and in intelligence and in even adaptability, because the lead white guy adapts and becomes one of the blue ones. So, oh my God, it's terrible now that I think about it. It's terrible.
All right, I'll add that to the list of terrible movies to see. I've seen the Neil Breen one, Vampire's Kiss, and now Avatar. That'll be...
Did you have any suspension of disbelief when you watched Fateful Findings?
Oh, God. My disbelief was suspended over a flaming pit of lava, and it was slowly roasting. So, yeah, I had some trouble with it. Yeah, that's a hard film to have any suspension of disbelief. Yeah.
Suspend your disbelief that you're watching this movie.
The thing that bumps you out of suspension of disbelief in that film is it just takes so long for anything to happen, so you get so bored watching it that your mind wanders, and then you break your suspension of disbelief because you're looking at the wall instead of the movie. So that's another thing that can break the suspension of disbelief. Boredom. Yeah, you don't want to bore your watchers. All right. Yeah, go.
One more thing, as I'm thinking about it. The worst distraction of suspension of disbelief is the one that happens after you have watched the movie. Like when you think about it again, because now I'm experiencing it with Avatar even more. When you say, wait, what I was fed doesn't jive in this way, it doesn't work that way, and it doesn't work in this way, and it is terrible. And you have this after the fact collapse of your suspension of belief.
Well, it just
That
collapses all
actually
over again.
works.
Yeah.
It's like a feeling of your audience will feel cheated out of their time and the investment that they had watching the movie. And you'd better make sure that this doesn't happen because it will follow you around afterwards.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, what was it? Highlander 2, I remember thinking, oh my God, this, while you're watching it, you can almost suspend your disbelief. Almost, but there's just too many spoofy, stupid things that break the rules of the world that they, admittedly, it's already a pretty crazy, weird world, Highlander 1, that movie, but you just manage to believe in it, which is an amazing sort of feat, to believe in this bizarre world, to have any suspension of disbelief, but you do. It works. There's people who can live forever until their heads get chopped off, and then they kill each other, and when there's one left, he gets all the magical power to do whatever, and electricity flies out of them when their heads get... It's just totally bizarre, but you buy into it. But the second film broke every single rule, and even made fun of some of the rules, which just breaks it, and then all you've got, instead of being this film that you believe in, is just a series of scenes, and that's all you can take away from it, that it looked good. It looked fun, even though the story just meant nothing. So, yeah. I totally get what you mean. Break afterwards, when you will try and make sense of it, which, you can do with movies. You can watch it and then you can think, I don't know if that totally makes it. Then your brain sort of puts it all together in a jigsaw puzzle for you and makes sense of it in a way, like we always do with everything. But in the end of this one, you just think, yeah, I just feel even more insulted than I was when I saw it. Yeah, which is always an interesting experience to get out of watching a film. Yeah, it's a good point. Should we? And I know I talked about. Oh, we're going to talk about Tanta's thing and Baines's, audience expectations and stuff like that. Or maybe we should just keep on talking about suspension of disbelief. What do you think?
Yeah, we could save the other stuff for other episodes.
Yeah, have we got more to talk on this subject?
I think that we could, if we just keep at it.
Keep at it, we just hammer it away. All right, well,
Yeah.
what are some other ways of breaking? Well, no, I like the idea of maintaining suspension of disbelief by introducing you to the world initially. So you talked about with the 300. So we've got the cartoon world, and we definitely say this is a cartoon world. But okay, another film in that vein by the same sort of thing was what was it? The film with Mickey Rourke playing a boxer and that other guy, Bruce Willis. No, Mickey Rourke played a hitman or whatever. Bruce Willis played a boxer. Baines, the film is all black and white. Just solidly black and white, like an ink drawing.
What?
Yes.
Sin City.
Sin City. That's it, Sin City. Which I thought, personally, was a crap film in other ways. But I didn't get broken out of suspension of disbelief. In this particular film, it's totally outside of reality in that it is, from memory, it's completely black and white, which they did really, really cleverly. You guys remember this film?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so instead of just being like grey and tones and all that, it's just solidly black and white, which is so weird. And initially you think, how am I going to accept the reality of this film when it's just such a crazy, crazy thing? Because no other films like that I can remember. But you do. And so you get involved in the weirdness of the film. And after that, things start to, even though everything else is crazy on the same level, they start to become believable in a way. So yeah, that is something that helps maintain suspension of disbelief for crazier things by introducing you to some bizarre concepts in the beginning, by just dropping you into this world, like, you know, dropping you in at the deep end. Splash, there you are, now you can swim.
I find that so I kind of surprised myself in that for you, is there feedback? You guys hear me?
Yeah, you're back again.
A little bit.
Sake.
Hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna sit back a little bit. Here we go. Okay. So like up until the latest Jurassic Park movie, I have always been able to watch the Jurassic Park movies. And that says a lot because as they go along, you need more and more suspension of disbelief because just crazy shit happens and people are so intentionally put in situations so they are, could be menaced by dinosaurs and stuff. But I am okay with that in these movies because I am there to see them be menaced by dinosaurs. That's part of the fun of it for me. So, like, my suspension of disbelief, I mean, it gets broken, but not catastrophically until the latest Jurassic Park movie came out. And I won't say much about it because I know it's new and a lot of people haven't seen it yet and stuff. And I mean, like, you still do get, like, dinosaurs chasing you and stuff and trying to eat you through a lot of it. That's still there. But, I mean, I'll just preface it by saying that this movie so utterly fucked with my suspension of disbelief that up until now, I was able to tolerate it even with like the last Jurassic Park movie that came out, the Jurassic World movie. Even with that, I was able to be like, but I'm still here. I'm having fun. I'm still here. This thing, dude, it's so utterly contrived is the word. It is one of the most contrived movies I have ever seen, to the point where, like, it made me mad. It was the first Jurassic Park movie to actually make me mad. So just, heads up for, I guess, whoever's going to see it. Maybe you won't find it that way. I find some other people enjoying it more than me. I'm an asshole and I was half drunk through it anyway, but maybe to know things.
I've heard it's pretty bad. Yeah. I know a lot of people didn't like the previous one either, but Jurassic World from a few years ago. I really liked it. Thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I
haven't seen the new one.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I hear the new one is really rough. So they say.
So this brings up
an
interesting thing to me. So you're saying, like, before you were able to accept it. So Jurassic Park is one of these, it's like a science fiction horror action film, whatever. It's got all that stuff in there, but it's one of these films that has ridiculous concepts in that dinosaurs are brought back from extinction and they're back to reality. So immediately you're having to get the audience to accept this a bizarre thing. In a science fiction film, it's the same thing. So we've got to accept, okay, people can fly in space now. There's artificial gravity. You can fly to other planets faster than the speed of light. We can do that. In fantasy, there's magic. There's dragons. Accept that. So when you're doing worlds that have these really, Predator, an alien comes to Earth and hunts people. So you've already got these bizarre, super weird things that are outside of reality. You got to get your audience to buy into that. How do you do that? And these films prove, we're talking about films, we're comicers, it doesn't matter, whatever. These films prove that you can make that work. You can do that. People believe in, not believe in, but people love Harry Potter with magic and brooms, Quidditch, all that stuff. People buy into that. Lord of the Rings, people buy into it.
Yeah, there's a lot of films that people buy into it with preposterous, like just going back to the Jurassic Park franchise. One of the things that makes that movie work so well and makes it such a classic is that it does a good enough job, actually kind of a convincing job of setting itself, saying like, yeah, this situation, maybe it could happen. We do have amber with bugs stuck in it. What if we could, manage to get DNA from that, pristine chamber of preservation? What if we could do that? And, and that's around the time that we started cloning goats and shit like that, or sheep, And so then the audience is primed then to be like, well, hey, maybe I will have dinosaurs in my backyard running around. And then everything else that happens through the movie are things, coincidental things that have to build up to come into certain events that happen, so you can get something like don't get me wrong, the first Jurassic Park, I love it to death and I will always love it to death, but there are lots of situations in there that even after the dinosaurs get out and run around, certain things that would never happen, all of a sudden they're saved by the T-Rex at the end that nobody heard come in or anything like that, but I still fucking love that part because I respect the movie enough. It didn't treat me like an idiot, and it delivered that part in the way that it had to, because for effect, but it just something about it works. For me, at least.
Follows story rules in a way that are pleasing, and it fits into the thing, and that doesn't break you out of the thing. Suspension of disbelief. Other things that, say, as a writer of a story or whatever, say Jurassic Park is a great example. You convince the audience of the reality enough that it makes sense, even though a scientist will look at the film and say, "Hang on, no DNA gets preserved that long a time, it's scientifically impossible, it'll break down, there's nothing left." Or they'll say, okay, velociraptors were not that tall, they were small kind of things, and people will just kick them out of the way.
Yeah.
So blah, blah, blah. A scientist will say that, but the audience haven't got that level of expertise. All you have to do is be able to make it convincing enough that it will be believable to most people, and it'll work. I'll go on.
Yeah. And I'll say too, concerning the scientists and stuff like that, I'm gonna bring up Indiana Jones, because I study archaeology. I'm a fledgling archaeologist, and there's a lot of shit about Indiana Jones that's not fucking archaeology, but still, I still love it as a movie. It doesn't break me out of my suspension of disbelief,
Wow, even with expertise, that's pretty good.
No, yeah, because I love it as a movie.
Oh,
I love what it is.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's lovable enough that you buy into it. Yeah.
What was that?
It's lovable enough that you buy into it. That those inaccuracies don't matter.
Absolutely, because it's its own story. It's its own contained story. It's not trying to say, it is what archaeology is like. It's just, as a movie, as a contained story, it's well made, it's well written, it's fun to follow. It makes that, if you make your story fun to read and follow and all that kind of stuff, that, I'm making it sound easier than it is. Suspension of disbelief will
just happen.
Be harder to break because you're more forgiving towards the movie then.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Or the comic, or the book.
I would also say, the example of Indiana Jones is very good. Exactly because everybody, even as a layman, I'm not an archaeologist and I will never be. So I'm a layman in terms of archaeology. And still I can understand. I know even as I'm watching the movies, that this is not how archaeologists are or what they do. But it doesn't matter because there are certain principles that they do respect about the archaeologists in general. And then they just slap on their larger-than-life hero. Because basically it's like a superhero movie, just in a different format.
Yeah.
So, but
Inventing
you do
everything.
have, this belongs in a museum sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Well, as he
a sort of,
not following any
yes,
archaeological protocol, that kind of loses its.
of course not.
Well, and the film became so iconic among, scientists and things like that. You have them going around the world, dressing in like fedora hats and leather satchels and
Yeah,
all that kind of
it's
stuff.
not insulting you. It has a self-awareness that, okay, we know we're not giving you an archaeologist, an actual archaeologist character. We're giving you a superhero archaeologist character that acts in this cartoon, that, all these adventures are taking place and some mythology is real, and or more, let's say, more concrete, and able, you are able to find it if you look hard enough. An X does mark the spot, even though everybody says it doesn't, and things like that. So it signals to you as an audience that this is going to be a fairy tale, but I'm going to make it fun for you. I'm going to take things that you expect to see and not badger you with things that would make you sort of feel that something isn't right. I'm not saying it too well, but the idea is like, I'm going to give you this nice fairy tale with some essence of things that exist in real life, and that's all it is, and that's all.
Because at the end of the day, we're following along with these stories not because they're photocopies of real life. You know what I mean? And that's the freedom of being able to create something, that you can create these fantasies and suspensions of disbelief and, color outside the lines a bit. But, like with anything, if you don't give your subject the proper respect that it deserves, or you're heavy-handed, or, if you're not careful, it can backfire on you a bit, and then it just becomes a waste of time.
Exactly, for the audience and the creator. And like I say, it's not really that hard of a thing to, we're talking about this as if it's such a technical kind of clever thing. It's not. You just got to be mindful.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Especially in the beginning, like if you have a basic premise that has some magic to it or some super technology to it. I'm sorry if you covered this already and I missed it. But most people go in willing to accept a premise. If your premise is wizards, high school wizards, or your premise is, this sort of swashbuckling heroic archaeologist, then is this what you just said already? I'm sorry if so.
No,
but then, like, generally people are going to go with it. It's not, you don't need to do anything fancy really to start off with, but it's later in your story or later in your series or whatever that you have to watch out for that consistency. If Indiana Jones suddenly has superhuman powers, you go too far with it, then it's another matter. Or if you're, you introduce, I don't know.
Aliens. You inject aliens into Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that movie kind of did both, right? He was sort of his surviving that explosion in the fridge, and he wasn't even hurt. That was kind of, I remember watching, and that kind of did it for me. I was like, I would have been okay with it if he was, kind of moaning and groaning or wincing a little bit. He was in some pain like he did in the earlier movies.
Yeah.
Then I'm okay with it. But it's like, that's what sort of took me out of it. And then the aliens, that was a little too much.
I was watching something that actually made a point out of that. They weren't necessarily talking about this suspension of disbelief, but it kind of fits in that the earlier Indiana Jones movies, the first three, there's always a point where, even if it doesn't last long, that you fear for Indy's life. He feels unsafe. Like, for instance, in oh god, I always get it mixed up. Was it Last Crusade? I think no, it was the one where he gets tossed in the snake pit. I think I can't remember anymore. It's been so long. Anyway,
Raiders.
Raiders, yeah. Raiders.
Yeah, and it's the one where he's fighting the great big buff guy, and there's the plane propeller that's spinning around, and then they keep on missing it, and it has parts like that where you see how spry Indy is and stuff like that, but at the same time you're worried for him. It's suspenseful because he may die, you know that he won't, but still, as you're cued in and you have your suspension of disbelief, even knowing that this is the main good guy in the story and he's not about to get splattered by propane pellet. Propane pellet. Plane propellers. You know that's not going to happen, but at the same time you are glued in. Yeah. Because you're out of the suspense that it still may happen. You know what I mean? Whereas the later movies don't do that.
And I think an element of that is that Indy himself is terrified of that propeller. If you see his look as they edge closer to it and stuff, he's like, oh no. He can see himself getting his head sliced up by this thing. And that gives him even more motivation to just not get again, just not be that guy and all that. Yeah. And that sells it. That sells it. In the fridge scene, he didn't seem to have this worry at all. Yeah. In general,
jumped into his magic fridge and
yes, and. And I would also say that the signals that the movie gives you is how strict you are with your suspension of disbelief, because we're talking about all these things about Indiana Jones, but if, for example, you take Schindler's List, one thing out of order in terms of historicity, in terms of how things were done, method of how the Jews were being rounded up or whatever, is going to cause outrage, even though it might be a very small deviation from what was accurate. People are going to notice and they are not going to like it, and it's they're going to start discrediting the whole thing because the movie is of a certain tone, and it's selling itself as giving you a postcard, if you can call it that, look in that era. It's bringing alive this era, and it's going to be accurate, and it's going to show you exactly what was going on there. Even if it is in a dramatic or cinematic manner, it's still going to be that. Yeah. So you expect that, and if you catch it not giving you that, then everything collapses because you don't trust it anymore.
Especially because that's a movie where it's meant to cause you pain watching it, because you're supposed to think that it is telling you the truth of the things that happened, and you're supposed to feel pain because of that. So then when you find out that kind of movie is, might be holding true to some painful aspects of it, but lying to you about other aspects, it feels quite manipulative then.
Yeah, you have to be careful with those kind of things. Be true to the tone of your story, but your people are a lot more forgiving of some sorts of stories than others. And it's not just things that happen in it, or, staying true to the rules of characters and that kind of thing. It can be staying true to the rules of a story or storytelling. Say you're telling a story about detectives and the procedure they're following, but you tell it in a way that is not your typical detective story kind of thing. You introduce some other aspects. You go way too heavy on the romantic comedy aspect, maybe. when there is a team investigating a grisly murder. That can be a good choice, but if if you mess that up too much, then you're going to bounce your audience out of suspension and disbelief because you got them too focused on the fact that this is a grisly murder scene investigation, and you're trying to have this lovey-dovey, typical romantic comedy between these two characters, and it's just the audience aren't buying into it. So that can do it.
Yeah.
There, all sorts of things like that. Tone, Sherlock Holmes kind of story. If Sherlock Holmes isn't the genius he's meant to be, then that kind of thing. Yeah. So there we are.
So the other thing I was thinking is that, for example, you were talking about the story not following its own rules, not necessarily
Style
the rules of reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a time where I was very much a Harry Potter fan. I really liked it, but there came this moment, definitely defining moment, where I lost all my suspension of disbelief, and then I couldn't engage anymore. And this happened after book 5, I think. I think it was book 5, not book 6, but I'm not sure. I have lost count. And the reason for that was that the entire world hinges on you suspending your disbelief on some basic crucial elements, not only in the nature of magic, but also in the nature of how the world of the wizards works in parallel with the world of the non-wizards, the magics. So when this starts breaking down, it felt a little bit like it was escaping the control of the author. And there were some things that shouldn't be happening, considering rules introduced in earlier books, or some things that should have happened and weren't happening, just to serve the story and even get the story forced to go a certain direction. And this spoiled it for me. From being very much enthusiastic about it, and even I have written fan fiction about it and all of that. I hate it now. I can't look at it anymore. And it is because it collapses in your hands, basically, and then you are left with nothing as a reader and as a consumer of this work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that's an important thing, when you do that to an audience and you mess up their trust that badly, then you lose them, and maybe they won't buy any other books. I mean, for me, like with Indiana Jones, it was the third film for me that was like a bridge too far.
A fridge too far.
A fridge too far.
Shit about Last Crusade, I will fuck you up, boy.
But for me, Last Crusades, you've got the whole dad aspect. So no longer is Indy the genius anymore. Now he's got someone else who's the genius action figure, and he's just the boy. He's just the kid. He's the sidekick now, and that sort of broke my trust in that character. And we have the magical immortal knight. Already we've had like bizarre things.
Yeah, they took a big risk at the end there. Yeah, I could see that.
But it's
I loved it.
Like, well, let me.
I loved it too. It's not like that knight was the center of the story. He was just the prize at the end. He's the prize at the bottom of the crack checkbox.
Yeah, well, I'm saying in
Sorry.
the what was it? The arc.
Yeah,
that was. So then we got something magical, like it burns people's faces off, blah blah blah. So it's not a world that is our own world. It's already a magical, hyper reality world. But for me, the knight was like he was a living human being from the past, and he just didn't fit in. And we've got the whole thing with his dad. And for me personally, I couldn't buy into the world anymore. And I just thought, well, it's visually it's fantastic, but this is just not for me anymore. And then I was just out of, I didn't worry about watching the fourth one. So I'm not saying the third one's bad. It was just
because everybody has a different
yeah
line where their suspension of disbelief is.
For me, for
and
example,
I think that's
and that is like how people take it. The third Indiana Jones movie for me is my favorite. I think it's the best one.
Oh, wow.
Me too.
Yeah, and the reason is because, unlike how you took it, the whole thing with the dad, I found was the best part of the movie, because it's not that Indy loses his capacity or his leadership, or he's the one that drives the story and he's the one that is in control, not his dad. But he constantly wants to please his father. And despite how objectively efficient he is in, everything he does, it doesn't matter if his dad doesn't, decide and deign to validate him. And it's this tug of war between them on that particular thing. And I love that. But that's also because I'm fascinated for things like that. And the night in the end was like Didre said, like Pitfe said, the thing that you find at the end of the rabbit hole, the magic payoff, and the whole mystical cave where they had to stay if they wanted to keep the Holy Grail. For me, it was perfect. It was perfect.
Wow.
The one thing I felt though is that it's a trilogy and this is where it ends. Because afterwards, if you are going to continue the whole Indiana Jones thing, you have to take into account that he has drank from the Holy Grail.
So he's immortal. So that's why you didn't have to worry about the fridge. There you go.
See,
only got in there so he didn't get fresh.
But I think that the thing with that, because I used to think about that a lot too. Not a lot. Didn't consume my waking hours, but somebody reminded me though that it's supposed to only have an effect within the confines of that temple, which is a real temple, by the way. I don't know if it's an actual temple, but
yeah, you can't leave. You have to stay there like the night you become the new guardian. Oh, damn, the fridge thing doesn't work.
So once you move, so once you leave, I think it's supposed to not take effect anymore.
Yeah,
but I do agree with what you're saying, that nonetheless, it makes a perfect end to the trilogy, especially for what Oz said, and that it really is, they find this big grand thing. It's because the whole movie has this, not a religious undertone in that it's preaching anything, but it's got this undertone about, faith, and that, how much faith does Indy end up having and coming and finding this thing at the end. He's basically coming close to God. He's it's all of these things that he has to go through at the end. They're tests of God. And we had some of that in the movie before this, but not so blatantly that I remember. And so really, and he has his come to God experience, not to put it so finely, because I think it does work quite well in the context of the movie, because it has to do with his relationship with his father and stuff like that. But the movie comes to a close with, he comes to this great and this night and this grail of immortality, and then afterwards that they're so great that they can't remain on the earth any longer. The whole place crumbles and it's sealed off from humanity. Grail is gone like it never existed, and they ride off into the sunset, and that is the perfect end to the series because of what Oz says. It is this big thing, this big defining moment, and what else is he gonna do? that's not to say that there can't be other movies, but it's like it's that jump the shark moment kind of, you know.
Yeah.
It's a great end.
Yeah.
It's a great end.
And now that you mentioned it, sorry, the fact that it is in this relationship with his dad, his mortal dad, let's say, throughout the movie, and in the end, he also comes to grips with the Heavenly Father. So he has to sync up the logic of the Heavenly Father to deal with the faith and the traps and everything. And then afterwards, pick the right grail, have the faith, drink it, and then give it to his mortal father. And then when they are coming out of this whole ordeal, he and his father are in peace between themselves. They are.
And you could take it further by saying that even to get to the Heavenly Father, he had to use the words of his earthly father. You know, his father couldn't go with him, and his father knew how to get through those traps and shit like that, but he could not follow him because he was wounded. And so Indy had to take that book that his father had written. It was his father that wrote that, right? I can't quite remember, but you know, the lessons that his father had taught him, and put his faith in those lessons in order to proceed. So,
oh God, so it's a religious allegory.
That's
oh
great. That's great stuff. Makes me want to watch it again. I've seen it many times.
Yeah, actually, me too.
Yeah, me too.
And even the fact that the movie opens when Indy is a young kid, and you know, he has, you know, the rush of youth and the whole drama. Like, I have this artifact that belongs to a museum, and his dad is in his Nirvana room saying, you know, count in Greek and stuff like that.
In Greek. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Count to 10.
And he starts doing it. He doesn't oppose him, actually. He starts doing it, but he backs out of the room. I mean, I think that it is a very well thought out film, and it allows you, which is another thing, it does you the courtesy of allowing you to read into it as much as you want, or not at all. And that's very good. That's why I think it's best of the three.
Oh my no! Oh, the first one. My goodness, you can't get past that.
Oh, you can, absolutely.
The Raiders of the Lost Ark. Oh, that's perfect.
It's a great film, but it's second to me.
That has your Ludger character even. That's just, you know, the glasses. Oh, it's brilliant. So many aspects.
It does, but this film also has the Ludger character with the guy in the tank.
Mm.
I can't even remember it.
I'm getting mixed up, but I'm pretty sure that
has a Zeppelin, which is good.
Or am I getting the movies confused? I could have sworn that's the one. Remember, it has a scene where there's that big chase going on, and he's hanging off of it and stuff. Yeah, and then you got the blonde German guy in there.
Tank that the Germans have in the desert for some reason, and it's.
And Phil gives suspension of disbelief. That's why he hates it. He's like,
no, that's totally believable. That's literally, like, historically, that's perfectly all right. I don't mind. It works better than the knights and the whole bridge thing. It was stolen from Lord of the Rings. I'm pretty sure that was where that came from, the invisible bridge. Have faith and it'll be there.
No invisible. Wait. Where is there an invisible bridge in Lord of the Rings?
I can't remember. In the book, maybe.
It's not invisible. It's just breaking.
Yeah.
That's the movie.
It's not invisible in the book.
It could be Hobbit or something. I remember. Anyway, yeah, I remember watching the film and thinking, I know the trick behind this. I've read about this before. Anyway, blah blah blah. That didn't break suspension of disbelief for me at all. It was just the film itself. It didn't for me, and what I felt about, like, as an invested fan.
Yeah.
It didn't stay true to my personal version of the character or my personal version of his world of the story, and then that's what took me out of it. So that,
and you're
and that happens
entitled
to
to
people.
that, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said before, we all have different levels of what we accept and what we don't accept, you know? I am still, you know, I'll still watch the Jurassic World movie and everybody else hates it, but I'll still have a good time, you know, even with accepting its flaws, you know, and everybody's just got a different level. Everybody's just got different levels, that's all.
Exactly. And as a writer of a story, whatever, filmmaker, whatever, you cannot account for that kind of thing. You cannot.
Yeah.
So that is what it is. You can account for some level of it, but yeah, in a certain level, everyone is very individual. So okay, I think we've sort of reached a good time in this Quackcast. And Baines has disappeared. All right. Well, thank you guys for being on the Quackcast number 382.
Pleasure always.
Oh, wow. You're really getting the accent now. Okay. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Baines, if you've come along, you can say goodbye.
Bye.
Oh, it worked.
Oh.
Bye.